Chundende Dish. Thus I have heard. At one time, the Blessed One was dwelling in the royal domain of Vulture Peak Mountain, with a great gathering of monks and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One was absorbed in the samadhi of the many aspects of phenomena called profound appearance. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, looking at the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, saw the five skandhas in their natural emptiness. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son of the lineage train who wishes to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom? Thus he spoke, and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, answered Venerable Shariputra with these words. Shariputra, those men and women of the lineage who wish to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom should look at it like this. The five skandhas should be seen purely in their natural emptiness. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form also is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, recognition, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, like this, all phenomena are emptiness, and having no characteristics, they are unborn and unceasing. They are not impure or pure. They neither decrease nor increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no recognition, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no sensation, no phenomena. There is no quality of sight, and so on, until no quality of mind and no quality of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance and no exhaustion of ignorance, and so on, up to no old age and death, and no exhaustion of old age and death. In the same way, there is no suffering, no origin, no ending, and no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and abide by the means of the profound perfection of wisdom, and since their minds have no obscurations, they have no fear. Transcending falsity, they attain nirvana. All Buddhas who dwell in the three times have relied upon the perfection of wisdom and have become true and complete Buddhas of unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of the profound perfection of wisdom, the mantra of insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra which calms all suffering should be known as truth, for it is not deceptive. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is proclaimed. Teyata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisoha. Shariputra, this is how Bodhisattva Mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and said to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, noble Avalokiteshvara, that he had spoken well. Well done, O son of lineage, it is so. O son of lineage, since it is just so, the profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced just as you have taught, and the Tathagatas will also rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, the Venerable Sharivattiputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva Mahasattva, and the entire gathering, as well as worldly beings, gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One.
Lama dong gombo jizan jambe yana changse lo kangye lo zhu zhini zhi zhi ni da na da la se we jini de kin chi jin zi shi ni ji do ka le bon anda se bi su ra ma re mi dong dong ni ji zi Lo zo gen la bu jie da zi yin la zhu jie yang dian song. Lo da jie zhu nie mo de jie jia zhu zhu zi jin. Ma re mi se dong ge niu gu jin jin jun zi re zhu nong. Dian nian da jie sa jie da zi yin de li zu. Yao zi do yue gu. 就着就当就念就这道理明，要被养了的阿拉巴扎那的阿拉巴扎那的阿拉巴扎那的，这的这。揭露原在这道理的莫名巴扎塞呢，嘎当天就用路多波耶，罗着波边头，罗多呀罗呀，所以是不愿就，就一就也没有呀。找呀人呀找呀牛一家，牛呀牛呀牛呀母呀牛，松呀牛呀小呀多，牛呀牛呀牛呀我呀。罗呀格呀诺呀多呀修呀罗修呀梦，哟呀就子罗呀梦。多呀波呀修呀浓，修呀修呀高呀波呀罗，求呀走呀走呀走呀的，求呀多呀走呀别，留呀走呀走呀莫。所以就业就业就业就不，哦呀多呀多呀多不着上，面着那个那样大呀也妙呀，我的造业那么真不净，那个是我变的就了。高真千百过年节多的，过送多着无着走多少，变作给那些人真的苦，讨厌着也是我公也送。马列谢家节俭这边多，下节做我的那做我的，多节钱多的钱多节长。 choze de lo ba da na ro ba ben jo ru be ba da de sha nya ne xin lo ji la so wa de sha bo tong me ye ne na zhe de zhou de de yue de na zhe be be xie zang guo san lu ni su nian ba ya jin shi be ji la so wa de yang yang yue me shu jie lu zhuo dang dao wan zhao ba ri be gu zhuo jian sang jie guan jiao pa pa ya se su sang mo da ye jie la so wa de xie zhuo dang bie cheng a de xiang ga dang dian bie ming bo zhong de jie nian jiu na jie gu qie song la so ga dang la ma dang la so wa de ma jie xin de zo jie zong ga ma mo do ri bie wang xiu jie zao jie dong a dian bie dao bo ke zhu jie yao se ju ba jie la so wa de jiao song ge de la ma do jie jiang gang la gang de xian nian zi zi ma gang la gang de xian nian zi zi nian chuo dang tuan bo gu zhu zhen zai bi zhen jie la ma na la so wa de rang jiao su roi ge la da ye min ge zang ta ba zhe bi zhong jiao zai yuan zhe bi ta kian zai ba ye sun zai xian nian na la so wa de jie wa ge de yang da la ma da zhe mian qi zhe bei la long xue jin sa da lang jie yin dian shao zuo nian 多觉强业果，念头也修，三界觉当作觉觉当当，想求不多多年叫做觉，道业觉觉觉别所能觉，若了偏心三界诸佛修三界。这当所见，觉当当，想求不多多年叫做觉。道业知见知别所能知，多了变现三界诸佛修三界，这能所见就能想求佛度当年教主，道业知见知别所能知，多了变现三界诸佛修。哎呀，他们说。데레 거저 뭐봐요 뒤치 치바제 세우러 왔다 다다 사다이 데레 치바 니히 데레도 아니 사가 뭔지제 나와 아니 덤바 까딘 진데이 다 뒤치 지 용어도 전에 덤바 까딘 진데이 뒤치인데 나한테 이노래 뒤치 개쳐 지면도 맞도 뒤치 소지 제도잖아 치바 벤다 동보라 춘춘 나왔어 아니 벤다 제발란스 아니 다 그냥에 렌데 방법도 상제마 아니 그 땅바 아니 저도 쉬워 안치 아니 변다 주반으로 충고고 고반으로 라보 되제스 다 템비 제스랑에 제나 다 뒤체체바진 소제면하게 데레 가서 가서 보고 아니 사바다이 뒤체치에 인자데 안데 좀 주비고는 도매진 노나야 아니 선나 아바사이게 치바도
As we are resuming our teachings after a while, and it is given this month is a special month, as you all know. That is, a Sabado month is still on the process, and as the followers of the Buddha, the teachings of the Buddha, we all know there are four major a special days that is observed and celebrated by the followers of the teachings of the Buddha. As this month, which is the fourth month of Tibetan lunar calendar, it's considered as a Sagadawa, which falls or commemorates Buddha's passing away to Nirvana, his enlightenment, as well as his inner birth. And then also we have another special occasion that is to be celebrated by followers of the teachings of the Buddha, which is in the 6th month of Tibetan lunar calendar. That is celebrated at turning the wheel of Dharma, the first turning of the wheel of the Dharma after Buddha's enlightenment. And then the 9th of Tibetan lunar calendar is a descending day for the Buddha's Buddha form, the Tushita, to the human realms. And the first month of Tibetan lunar calendar is said to be, commemorates Buddha's miracle powers, or the displaying of the miracle powers.
당가 저기 댕지 당가 저기 가서 다 잠린 디 토나 세거네 디스 디 토나 세거네 댕지기 거라 따와게 따주 때는 병이게 땜바치 로니 동마장라 잠린데라 페네 아니 토마 아니 뎀바신에 좀 비추지 소마라 댕지 있잖아 시에는 사제성이 이제 캐말레나야 따주 코로나토네 신주제네 뭐네 할래기 신주바치 페바라 페바레도 당가 저기 출루 깨쳐 무시와이나야 개개 쉬우지로와.
So if you look at and analyze very carefully, we will find the teachings given by the Buddha is something that is very scientific teachings. As Buddha came to this world more than 2,500 years ago, he started to giving a teachings on the Four Noble Truths. And whether one follows the teachings of the Buddha, or whether one follows any kind of religion or not, but if you look at the teachings of the Buddha, beginning from his teachings of Four Noble Truths, it is something that is relevant to entire spectrum of all walks of life.
아주 출루 켈링에 지기 계시시에나 덤바되게 니 추송에게 까진지데 파 유쇼송도아 유쇼송도 가르세나 변나 계속 상제동에 나 뒤에 된지라 니 뒤에 되다 대신 세워 되게 뒤에 되게 변세게 인생에 니 당차자 그 거지라 니 단단 맞서 거기 니망마디 전도와 너무 신의 라빈 도안데다 지서종에면 합이 거되라 니 상추선바 장시 추워생에 되게 저와시비 거되라 니 희망하듯이 되잖아. 아니 말하는 게 지스쟁이 인생에. 아니 선제 가는 뭐지 빵되잖아. 당자자도. 얘네 아니 수지 선전하게 있는 상주선 뭐니 또 전부. 아니 처나 괜지들 할레버에서는 아니 뼈가 다 봐봐. 아니 뼈 동손에 가서 지 자자버 세거래 당가서 비니 사요하세요. 등지기 자자네. ene ngaso pesa na sombe kala sanje ge chu sombe na ngaso la kadin cheba yimba mase kima tu cheba kono yi kadin la ene ngaso she de me bare sa tar sondo.
So here, now if you look at the time the Buddha has come to this world, what is known as the five degenerated time. That is Buddha who himself has committed to be in this world at this time of five degenerations. Because at that time, among all those great Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, when the question is asked, so who will be able to, turn the wheel of Dharma, or who will be able to benefit sentient beings at the time of 5 degenerations? And none of those great beings were able to, come up and make a commitment to be able to distribute the sentient beings at the time of 5 degenerations, except Buddha Shakyamuni. So as a Buddha Shakyamuni, stood up and committed himself to be able to come to this world to benefit all other sentient beings during the time of 5 degenerations. And all other great beings have been amazed and marveled by his commitment, unconditional commitment to benefiting other sentient beings, so that all of them came together and praised him. And it's such a powerful praise, so much so that by means of the praising Buddha, the resounding of the praising Buddha even shakes the 3 worlds.
아예 아마서 차진 나기 세나면데 다 된리게 템버 가든지데 제스 템버 세나레 아니 맞아 통단이라 샤와니 통마 кино 제거야 있잖아 아니 랑게 된제 나가 되니라 아니 템버 투면 한번 뭐네 단다 시엔지 되지 나봐 맞지 저 로마트에 소리지 마이바 아니 투자와 쳔베 다니레 준비 아니 다서 요제랑 신치제 랑게 된제 나가라 메바체 대학을 뒤에 네 타고다 달랑을 집에 남았어 나 저기 따때 맞춰 내가 된대로 이제 최시주 소모 따지네 랑게 전체 짜이랑 봐 아니 지 남아요 소도 줘봐대 나 이제 나가라 패드여스체 아니 랑게 타고다네 되게 랑게 나는 데도 소리지 많이 봐 아니 지 소차 무슨 진짜 잠들린 대선에 동선 다 연수 줘봐 아니 데린 가서 지 추에 체내자서게네 지 냥들 해도 여서네 냥 연수 줘봐 되니게 맨 된저 템바 되니라 지도 간성연의 저대에서现在 상지기 선발로 초 예비 돈에 맞아 그만 이치 매바 책임다.
So with this, we will begin with cultivating appropriate motivations to receive the teachings of the Dharma. As you are all familiar with, it is important to complete 2 actions in the beginning, actions at the end. Actions in the beginning is to cultivating appropriate motivations, and actions at the end is to dedications. At this point, we are the first actions, which is actions of cultivating appropriate motivations. For that, let's remember the kind, unconditionally kind and compassionate teacher who is the Buddha Shakyamuni in the space before oneself, and who is gazing at all sentient beings, including oneself, with his compassionate eyes and sense of caring of all those beings, who he is then surrounded by all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, or the lineage Lam Rim masters, without exceptions. And all of them are actually gazing at all of us, gazing at all sentient beings, including oneself. And then one is imagining oneself being in their presence, not only oneself, but also one is surrounded by all sentient beings without exceptions, and having a strong feeling, sense of connectedness with those objects of refuge that you have been visualized. And maintaining these feelings, one then take a couple of minutes to meditate upon.
哎，那做这个，那个去的爬天去的节多，他们觉得要不这个这个，你不的，你得要不去这么些，起码你的交流的没把觉得你交多，你得去亚克罗先吧，这个。되지. 다 가서 되는다. 아니, 되게 매바 집에 가라. 아니, 가서 대사게 산에 소소게 대사게 산에 되는 거 좋아해나요? 지 최친이 집에 가라 투노노도 가라. 아니, 산에 되네. 세게 지 대선 zam을에 되는 매게 마추네요. 쇼용도도. 되게 제제네. 되게 매바 제와이나 대야 도비 제선are. 아니, 소소게 저와이 차네. 아니, 솔로버치사에 집에 줘라. 네. 지 산엔 대기네 준비 있으네 아니 소소 산엔 대라요 지 메게 마툴어서 메용도 되네 내가 대다 아리바티 연서 저거 투면 와이나 신대 집에서 마서나 투면 되는 거보다 네 라바도 맞아 치어들 동부 라마게 치어서 베깔아니 라바도스 제나 라다는 메다메 살라도 깔아 아니 지 치어녀 바텔라지 로아 미지레스 마이바 아니 지 라도 로다 내진도 저사 연수 줘봐대 아니 대다대 이게 돈은 아니 치어시에게 투면노아이나 소소 마탈라 소소게 현대는 비천절라 되게 투면노아이나 고추 친해제게 표현이었습니다. 스펙이 전부도
Particularly if we are able to visualize the sentient beings of this country and as well as country all around the world. At this point, as we all know, there are a lot of chaoses going on, such as war, epidemic, pandemic. People are undergoing tremendous amount of sufferings. So if you're able to visualize and imagining all of those beings in their presence, in the presence of all those great object of refuge, if one is able to visualize in such a way, one will be able to accumulate tremendous amount of mirrors. It will also benefit, as we all hence human beings of this planet Earth, we have a strong connection with all the sentient beings. So, so therefore, whenever the teacher gives a teachings, it is a custom of making a hand gestures of what is called the turning the wheel of Dharma, hand gestures of the teachings, preaching the Dharma, and reciting those verses of saying that whatever the teachings that I'm giving, it is not only to the individual who is in this who's present in this particular venue, but rather giving these teachings to all the sentient beings, including Deva, Naga, Gandharva, Asura, Kinnara, and so on and so forth. And imagining the teacher is also imagining all those infinite sentient beings without exceptions, being all of them are actually present in this huge, infinite congregations and giving these teachings. And from our side, we also have a similar wish to be able to visualize all those sentient beings without exceptions, Deva, Naga, Gandhar, Asuras, and so forth.
되지. 아마 저기 단다 되게 내가 저기 소다 타고도니 타협이 선지 미바 제베게 되게 아니 가서 단 전자선에 되게 가서 철한데 놓는 데린 거서 보고 가리시게 배설어서 아니 사송주 드메지고 네 상초 랑제를 배고라 내가 저기 친해제 인세 되지와 자기다 데미고는 세고로 선배도는 소화유비도.
With this visualization of the object of refuge and the visualization of all sentient beings in our surrounding without exceptions. And what is being discussing with today is that we're discussing on Sasungitome, which means the light of three worlds, the text, what is known as the great deities on the stages of the path to enlightenment. And then imagine that, as we mentioned earlier today, just try to maintain this, strong feelings of having all beings with oneself and receiving these precious teachings of the great deities on the stages of the path to enlightenment.
那想就让人去么生意的，你说这边是说呢，我呢，他我把俺说每个旁人这些人那了，你给这的车钱都没钱嘛，就根本投票不，我们留住把点到这吧，上街讲来点去，第一我呢真上了，你讲我们中国不吃不下去而已，我那里，但这个基本当不推荐这边，你想做啷这种吧，是的，你我说给钱你结完。
So if we were to talk about that, who actually invented these teachings of the great deities to the deities on the stages of the path of enlightenment, and such precious teachings can be traced back to the main source, which is Buddha's teachings of the Buddha himself, and which is then transmitted to the great Indian masters, such as Nagarjuna, Chandrakriti, Buddha Palita, Dignath, Atisha, and Lama Tsongkhapa.
啊，的确，那这个上面上丘浪就什么，的确俺做对的，俺对俺做去些别个了，看去电脑了，娘都说什么三八三别说的去接着教完呢，我那就的前年没得那接码头玩意呢，就可是啥，看不对脑了就别说接了，那秋风真不在意啥这些，秋风真不代表性，这把别抢啊，是呐，那。단단 정말로 뭐 정말 친구이 토마나네 친구 손비 거라 랑소 많이 봐 아니 다자 템바 투비 엄버네서 랑게 전체 사이 남이 바지 용 용수 줘봐대 슈리 잡아질라 주콘센바 템비신 제법이 쳐와서 이때는 도와드리 제대 두고.
So when we were receiving the teachings, what I would suggest first of all is to withdraw one's mind inward and try to withdraw one's mind inward and don't let our mind scatter everywhere. With this, then one is listening to the teachings beginning from the greatness of the authors given in order to show the teachings of the noble source. So this is where we're acknowledging this greatness of the teachings is because this particular teaching is not, it is actually independently written by Lama Tsongkhapa himself. It is the source of all the teachings of the Buddha. As we mentioned earlier, that if we were to trace the teachings, we'll be able to trace the teachings all the way to the Buddha himself. So therefore, in this particular teaching, the great deities on the stages of the path to enlightenment, it serves as a synopsis of the teachings of all the teachings of the Buddha.
的确，当然，去这里的些的忙着的嘛都，我那天呢，就是目前生意的，我从那么说呢，就啥东巴的，我就现在是能做呢，你刚才那个人都等你也说这人么多，是吧？啊，的可别个，我说结巴的介绍名片就来接，你那么的拍主角去给钱了啊，第一个了。 아니 자존의 배경 세에 그런 예 말이야. 영수 줘봐네. 아니 신지 집에 토네. 아니 취지 저와 나를 전부터 오늘 취지 저와니도 되게 실례니 시제다 시와서 얘기 취지 저와 대양 아니 진득이 남아 제대 아니 냐도 영에 들어왔다. 나서에나 교사 장소에 토네. 아니 때나 배상에 용진이 용들에 저와 레여서네. 오늘 뽑아 제초해지 저러.
So to understand the greatness of these teachings, as we talked about earlier, the teachings that has a noble source. So if you look at the author himself, which is Lama Tsongkhapa, who's Lama Tsongkhapa. Lama Tsongkhapa is not, as I mentioned earlier, it's not someone who independently written this great deities on the stage of the path to enlightenment. nor he just right from the beginning, he maintained solitude and meditated all entire life, but rather he relied on the 60 to 70 great masters of the time, and went to a rigorous studies of the great deities or the teachings or the texts written by the great Indian masters, particularly, as well as the masters, the great Tibetan masters as well. And it is not Lama Tsongkhapa who actually emphasized on cultivating a faith, but his way of teachings is emphasizes on more cultivation of analysis, going through critical analysis, and the teacher is someone who has gone through such an analysis and investigations and draw these conclusions of giving these teachings and compiling all those teachings of the Buddha and presenting to us. And suddenly it is worthwhile for all of us to understand the greatness of the teachings of the Lama Tsongkhapa, which has a noble source.
아이, 당연히 쉬운 거로서. 제문에 저는 이 중상 동계 초원대 있어. 바덴 레버시비 장소와인서. 로 주부선 랑지를 뭐 여러분 조셔는 쓰시면서. 근데 저 빠바다 데미고는 마치 손에 치트만 네바데 지어라. 빠바데지.
So this it says that the great teachers of the path enlightenment describes the practice of the three persons of small capacity, middling, and great. And also, it is also known as the ocean of the teachings of the Dharma.
되지. 사실 이 바치 손바텔라이니 저와니도 디비출은 해자다 셰고레 살라위 베칼라이니 아니 녀녀게 속에는 추가를 차기 가르다 데베토는 추녀거래 생에게는 아니 차기 가르다 데베토는 추시 그래서 나라에 되게 아니 맞어 가서 해자다 샤워 생에대로와 대도도 제 라와이나 아니 소속에 단지 추녀베 지원마데 현대 너버 친절라 아니 교롱 이거는 시티대로와 차기도 되면은 세대 아니 서재타주 조비 상지제 공방 되게 치에도 네 상조랑의 전부터 전에 제게 생기지 마잖아 상조랑의 전부 전에 제일 시그마로 마타이 아니 가서 어쨌든 가서天津가서天津的 시주 템바세 되다 아니 내 주정수 관계제 세세게 돼서 맞아 누구하지 제단에 되지 아니 그 최신의 지 강사 진행소나 차진 아니 맞아 마타야 되거로 가서 추세님뭐见面都说要到几个电视的，那么呢，前几天的时候给闽南呀，哪里全部的要不那一直都送土啊，去马家也那的，对，去被打破的现在这，那老罗们进来听着啊，那到还来一点年可全部了吧。
So then this will then be followed by the next two outlines of the showing the greatness of the teachings in order to engender respect for the teachings. The third outline is on how to listen to the teachings in which the teachings and its authors are great. So now the question is that particularly the third outline, when it says how to listen to the teachings in which the teachings and its authors are great, and how to listen and and teach the teachings. And so now, when it comes to the question of how to listen, it is talking about cultivating appropriate motivations. At least motivations is my very purpose of receiving these teachings is to attain complete state of enlightenment for the benefit of all other sentient beings. Similarly, the individual who's giving these teachings should also have a pure motivations of benefiting whoever is listening to these teachings. And although that such a teaching teacher or instructors may not have a pure qualities of the teacher that we find in the text, at least such individual who's giving the teachings must have a pure motivations of benefiting all sentient beings. This kind of motivations is required for both teacher as well as the listener.
아야 되게 가서 제시면 제가 제가 사제적이 돈을 제시 강 투투지자 아니 된지지게 돈은 추어는 추던 뭐 볼라 아니 이번에 대파 소화를 이제 해도 제가 내가 소었더니 생기던 저비 돈은 소사는 뭐도 텔레신방 가서 개개 열로를 내용이 큰요 개개요 말어 인사등에 사제의 돈은 뭐 소화 영역이 지시에도 다 내가 속이 텔레 댐비게 추던 뭐 볼라 아니 대바당 지까지 지내도 지때 소화량을 제로잖아. 그래서 할 얘기 저기 친구 알아.
So I'm going through these outlines and giving, shedding a little lights on those outlines without going through all this, elaboration of the entire teachings as today. And so with this, we will, with this explanations and following this explanation with feelings, in other words, then one will be able to generate a fervent, devotions or the faith towards the teacher as well as the teaching, the Dharma, the teaching itself. Because when we talk about the faith, it's not something that we're not talking about something that is a blind faith, but rather it is just by inspiration drawn by the teaching itself. And the teacher who is giving that such teachings is, embodies the knowledge of the contents of the teachings of the texts, the great teachers on the stage of Sapat enlightenment. When you have this, then one will be able to generate a fervent faith towards teacher as well as the teachings.
되지. that's why 사제 저 넘버 건저 너무 제때 되게 봐. 아니 될라 아니 완전 자와 신이 되면 제때 되는 거 제가 신이 좀 많이 있어요. 근데 이거는 가서 대량에 라고야 되지. 뭐 신이 되는 좀 멀리 손주 봐도 아니 강전에 매바치 참소지 로게 지내서나 사제 시작전에 매바전에 강저 그러면 또 지고 주사를 줘요 말어. 사제 시작전에 강전에 아니 가서 가서 샤강도 지 제거해나 사제 시작전에도 그래.
So then the fourth outlines is a Tampong which is the sequence in which the disciples are to be taught actual instructions, which will then be followed by the how to rely on the teachers, which is the root of our spiritual path, and how to listen, how the students train their mind after having relied upon the teachers. So those are the very important outlines that one need to remember, because when we meditate on when we engage in meditation on the great teachers in the stages of path enlightenment, Lam Rim meditations, and those outlines must be memorized, in a sequential order, either not randomly, but rather sequential orders. All those outlines are given in such an order for the individual who is actually engaging in the meditation of these teachings.
되지. 당은 뭐 좀 이 상자받아 사제 지고 신이다. 또 된리 되는 것도 사제 미게 받아 대사에서는 무슨 천상 받아는 사제 맞죠. relation.
So I will go through the readings of all those outlines as usual, and then probably we will stop here with this today.
라리 친이 정에다 뜻이 얘나 라메 사제 창소 미게 받아 말에 받아 사제 창소 디테도에다 아니 걔네 너도를 주유주도 돈 거야다 그래서 라리 친이 정에 저기 메시지 체절에 얘나 가서도 제절을 내나 되게 표준소바다 가고도 아도 치스나 배는 라리 친이 정에 저기 다라도 거
It is a custom for giving the teachings of the Lam Rim, prior to one's actual teachings and going through the recitations of the six preparations rituals, reading through all those verses, as well as the supplication verses of the Lam Rim lineage. And then the guru who is actually giving the teachings must go through the entire outlines of the Lam Rim Chenmo. This is a custom of when engaging in teachings discussions on Lam Rim.
我是觉说给我呢去想嘛去结个人，我呢去结个人呐，那呢老天前么着我记了，西塘老汤简单是吧？刚觉的老也当，你没把旁人简单着，点了多少呢？我也接嘛，那点没把接嘛，所以这话他人不手机里叫哪里早年的没对不到了，你别得哈着我是吧？就是这出了当下个是吧？ でみばちたにげろなげられちもさちこのちしじゃちさちこのとのみばちこのさちでいこのかるかでそうやなせちにもねまかんじゃねもにちどげなめつででねちゃがち
So now receiving the teachings of the Lam Rim, it's always once listening to the teachings of Lam Rim must be followed by the practice itself, not just listening to the teachings. Following the practice, as we mentioned earlier, in the sequential orders of all those outlines, and try to have at least some, levels of experiential understanding of these teachings, and then be able to have, one will able to embark upon the path, the spiritual path. Otherwise, just by listening and going through the readings of the outlines of the Lam Rim Chenmo alone, it's not really becoming fruitful. Or if one is able to do this with understanding of all those meanings and going through the proper sequence of all those outlines and meditating, then one's life will become meaningful as a practitioner.
电脑觉得讲人把了你，第一点了，你不能必须给我当，你不觉得人必须年纪，但你不觉得人必须了你，而且那家了你不就是当，你不能去我去，但懂不这次，但你不能去我了送，就不全个的同么样，那些人嘛娘生年去，就不真的同么样，就不前边那些人嘛娘生年去，懂不你这次，就不前边那些人嘛娘生年去了送，提前了就不过三节宽那点吧，三的觉得就不去三节的小包路去，懂不你这次。 但三节的小包路去了送，三节的老包路不比较真，他现在这完了，路边上节门住吧点吧，老包路边人把你写吧去，他懂不你这啥？他老包路边人把你写吧了你，贴吧全部就老这种，贴吧都多些贴吧了老去，他懂不这是？干啥？多些贴吧了去，他懂不了送。 提前了上，可是上山就老把老弄在讲嘛，上山就设计当把送，说那接单人比出去，他懂不你的？他说那接单人比出了送，刚了老比些，掉了老把那掉了老别人把去，掉了老别人把了你送去，学把就老这种，去把他发现他们你老这一，他懂不这啥？他发现他们你老这了送主人。 现在的劳动也偏些吧，现在等你这个的些几天吧，你现在劳动人工，你等你个刚个别健身，个人也把说老自己，他懂不这些，他懂不俺的这，他说老这了你现在这种劳动了自己，他劳动了这了业绩，劳动就错点吧。 劳动就รับ的要啊，劳动刚别就刚别劳动都别自己，他懂不了这送。 담대한 게 이제 서로 뭐서 근데 루루주 공부를 취재 다정와 근데 또 많이 이제 따와 되나 봐지 또 많이 이제 또 많이 이제 따와 되나 봐라 송 배치 송래 송 대권이 이제 대권한이는 주기를 받아 대권은 되나 봐봐 뭐 대권한이 되나 봐봐 뭐는 송 진사에 리뷰 가자 뭐서 근데 대 다른 관계 루시에 봐 아니 알레 제가 또 많이 이제 또 되나 봐봐 뭐 있어 다 동반이 이제 다 동보라 소리 가장 먼저 그 이제 가장 뭐 맞아 비 랑루 신루 가봐 네 랑루 잡아 네 담아서 거서 봐봐 네 가장 뭐 맞아 비 신루 가봐 세대네 되는 인자는 맞을라 네 동보 뭐 상주게 생지 마드 배경 쪽에 삼배 주민 되네 상주게 생지 되네 아니 이 동의 자세 지셔고 파르신 거 둘러서 아니 델라 사네 아니 파시 타마니라 로그비 제세마레 인자네 강가 냥도 냥세네 그리 준비 파시 냥세네 비 냥도라 아니 용수도 봐 아니 주바 냥세네 상하데 제바 냥세네 야로 얘나요 그러면 디피컬 드리지 디샤도 인자네 텐주게 토네 네 상초랑 제르 봐 셴니 텐텐네 좀 머르비 손주지 바도 아니 랑델레 랑디노라 하샤 이 파 제다질레 렌샤 케케요 마레 로기 토는 방지 냥레 토는 방지 소나 용수 줘봐 가서 지질랑지 체셔봐 세대 나리 첨모 창소에 인자네 인데다 메려지 제게 인사네 감각이 보면은 근데 라네 또 근데 랑세 랑게네 선바치고제 쳐냐네체 와 드리지는 같은 거 제도야 돼别的 잡으러 와 근데 쳐도 체비까지 뭐 소위 라제소네 데려 라체소 드리지 통면으로 되는 것도 드리지자
So as the teachings that we find in here, as we mentioned earlier, the great deities in the stages of the path to enlightenment encapsulates entire teachings of the Buddha. One is able to follow these teachings, not only just by reading through it or just listening, but rather if one, put an effort to practice those teachings, and one is then really engaging in the teachings, engaging in the practice of teachings of the Dharma, not just reading the teachings of the Dharma. So therefore, it's these teachings, must be practiced by cultivating renunciations, bodhicitta, and the perfect view of emptiness. And then also, if you look at the teaching itself, there's a sequence of the teachings of teachings on generosity, ethical discipline, patience, diligence, and meditative concentrations and wisdoms. And all of these teachings are given for one individual's practice, and all these teachings, must be combined with all this practice. The teachings must be practiced, and one's practice must be combined with the practice of Vajrayana as well. So if one is able to do this, then one is understanding what is the meaning of the great deities on the stages of path enlightenment, and one understands how to practice great deities on the stages of the path enlightenment. And with this, then one should always, ease one's mind and try to cultivate, calmness of one's mind, which is, our main aim for achieving happiness. Lesson.
당아서 뭐 치긴다 뭐 디디르치 뭐 디디스나 피시 틀라다 치면 당화 치긴다 도게 주니 사베 개와데 대도 조와 켜노 건베 쳬보 주즈 로선 조보 띵비니 모 렌도 세제 소사제 luju me du zhang zhi zhou ni jie ni de jian bo de sang jie xin du mi de bei wo lu gun nang do xin la xue bo shu jie wo gun du yang do nang mo zhi mi qu zhi bei la long jie ji sa dang lang jie yu de rou du do jie jiang ge gu 用多少也能够着，每天那个那样那样，天天人都别来送你，看到阳光刚些扫把，路面马的开动着，能真家也红包到就接，他妈随便菜肉更多。 江边养猪，这边就送的，天边人包跟上浪子，年年周边见到那些肉上边之间多边浪子，小到这边张月到给见，周月一见面包谁谁， 家业担保有人真就的担保人真出个马家，小将娘保就别说的呢，年纪真不一让就么，偏的对的生活是包容，三天教育没用真的，来着上学能就人别讲，他的能就一浪别的。家园在保证多将就见朗诵主编听见主席。眼见世界门当明明跟菜刀更多家园和睦，那当着我们就见刚才的话说了就是，虽然住了村把的院子，土地能就大多出现，这些政策中。有就见，就是老民国才让天见，能够真的说真讲。老张对面这门上松，高也没生到多年就爱见，看着状元过于心忙。偏当的我们邻居也年轻人在我的人当中，小百姓的保度天就见，让百保人知道什么。更多让步的样的现的得到更加接受到，给我得到堂前老多我的送些别叫我堂前，我刚了就多我把的大心给原早晚的给，让步谢谢老多我的，哎呀，这里都去，
老说什么
这
去？
去
都去，给你们拍个白皮，就是，
不过当些人
好嘞，呀呀。
家头嘛，说我过当些，
个搞得眼的开始来了嘛，是吧？呀呀，
老说什么去？
对去，
老说。
呀呀，对去。